Hi, today we're going to start the next unit, which is going to be called Systems of Equations. So basically, if we take a look here, we are going to be examining more than one thing happening at a time, which in itself is not new. So if we read this situation, Mackenzie has to choose between two cell phone companies to sign with. One company, Cell Central, charges a membership of $50 and then 25 cents per text message. Another company, Phone Fanatics, charges a rate of 50 cents per text. I did some active reading, noticing, of course, that we have a rate and a initial charge. So when it asks us to write the linear equation to represent the cost for each company based on the number of text messages sent, take a second and see if you can do that on your own. Pause the video if you need to. But I have that the Cell Central charges a membership fee of $50 and then 25 cents per text message. Phone Fanatics charges a rate of 50 cents per text message, but it doesn't appear that they charge a membership fee. So if you want to, you can put the +0, but you don't have to. Okay. Now the next part says to make a graph. I think for the purposes of what we're going to do here, I'm going to skip that for a second and go down to the tables first. So notice there are two different tables, one for Cell Central and one for Phone Fanatics. So if I first take a look at the number of texts per month, notice back up in the original equations that our rates are decimals. So I think I'm going to make my text go by pretty large amounts. So I'm going to start with 0, and then I'm going to go by 50s on this one. And in class I'll explain more why I might do this and what kind of decisions we have in terms of what to choose here. Okay. I am going to make sure that I do exactly the same thing in the other table. So I'm going to do 0, 50, 100, 150, 200, and 250. All right. Now, as far as the middle part where it says work to find the cost, that just means how do we use our equation. So it's the idea of inputs and outputs. This says that the input is 0, or the number of texts is 0, keeping in mind that x stands for the number of texts. So this would be y equals 50 plus 0.25 times 0. And this would be y equals 50 plus 0.25 times, well, now the input's 50. Okay, and so on. If you'd like to, go ahead and pause the video and continue filling this in. Okay, now I'm going to use my calculator, and I'm going to fill in these. I'm going to just do the work. So 50 plus 0.25 times 0 is 50. 50 plus 0.25 times 50 in my calculator is 62.5. The next one is 75. Again, please pause the video, finish doing the work on your own. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same exact thing with the other table. So I'm going to start by filling in my information. So this time the input is 0, but I'm looking at a different equation, so it's y equals 0.50 times 0. And then times 50. Go ahead and finish filling this out and find the total cost for each number of texts. Okay, now that I got the tables, I think that it's now a good time to go back up and do the graph. Recognizing, of course, that if these are the inputs, then these are basically x, and if these are the outputs, these are basically y. And so these are x and y. And so I'm just going to really quick make sure I label my graph. The bottom part down here was the number of texts. The side part is going to be the cost. I need a title for this thing, which I might call cell phone plans. And what I'm going to do now is plot points one at a time for each company. So I see 0.50 in my first thing, so I'm going to put that right there. And now, if you recall from the last unit, I really only need a couple of points, 2, 3, at least 3 points to create a line. So what I'm going to actually do is skip the ones with decimals. I'm going to skip that one. It's not too bad, but it's also not really necessary. So my next point is 100 on the x and 75 on the y. So I'm going to go to 100 and go up to 75. And then I'm going to skip this one here again because it's a decimal. And I'm going to go here to where x is 200 and y is 100. So 200 and 100 right there. And that's the last good one I have. But the good thing is I have 3 points. So now I can use my straight edge and I can connect my dots, which gives me this line right here. Remember that lines go on forever, so I need an arrow here. But I'd like you to think about why I do not want an arrow over on this side. In the meantime, I'm going to plot my next one. So this has 0, 0, 50, 25. Notice there are no decimals in this table, so I'll plot everything. So I have 50, 25. I have 150. And I have 150, 75. 75. And the next is 200, 100. And 250, 125, which is going to be right about there. Again, I have plenty of points. I will go ahead and plot. I can tell from this, by the way, that I made a mistake. Here is my arrow. I definitely plotted that wrong. 75 should have been right there. Remember, mistakes do happen. It's not a big deal. Okay. Now, I told you 5 minutes ago or so that this is all about something called systems of equations. If you notice, we have 2 different equations. We have 2 different tables. Put them on the graph and have 2 different lines. And that's the idea of a system of equations right now. But really the most important thing, if you read number 4 here at the bottom of the page, what is the point of intersection of the graphs? Notice that these 2 graphs cross. This is really what we're going to be doing for the next couple of weeks or so, is working on finding where 2 lines cross each other. We're going to start by doing that on the graph, but eventually move off the graph and do it just using the equations. But for now, let's see what point they cross at. It appears to me like they cross at 200, 100. Right here is their point of intersection. So the point of intersection is 200, 100. In terms of, I apologize, it's the point 200, 100. In terms of what does this point represent, remember that x is the 200 and y is the 100. X stood for number of texts and y stood for cost. So this is 200 texts costs $100 at each company. What I would also like you to realize is I actually knew the answer to that before I even did the graph. If you look at the table that we filled out, did you happen to notice as you were filling it out that right here we got x being 200 and y being 100, and in the other table x was 200 and y was 100? The same x value gave us the same y value in both equations. And this is where we are headed for the next week or so. When you come to class tomorrow, we will practice these ideas and maybe a couple of more. If you have any questions, please be ready to ask. I will see you mañana.